The drama surrounding professional fighting has always been tangled up with money, and for good reason. Step into the world of the UFC and you expect to see mansions with infinity pools, garages stacked with supercars, and champions flaunting six-figure watches the moment they step outside the octagon. That is the image the sport sells, the image most people carry in their heads when they picture a UFC title holder cashing in on years of blood and sacrifice. But scratch beneath that surface and a completely different story begins to emerge, one where some of the wealthiest, most accomplished fighters in the history of the sport have deliberately chosen to live like men who never made it big at all. These are champions who could buy anything they wanted the moment they walked out of the arena, and instead they chose modest homes, ordinary vehicles, and lives built around family, discipline, and quiet purpose rather than spectacle. This is the story of the UFC's richest fighters who refuse to act rich. Start with Stipe Miocic, a heavyweight champion who has spent years proving that being the best heavyweight on the planet does not mean you get to quit your day job. While fighters half his accomplishment were out buying Lamborghinis, Stipe kept showing up for shifts at the fire station in Ohio, pulling on his gear, responding to emergency calls, and yes, scrubbing toilets alongside the rest of his crew. His fellow firefighters do not treat him like a celebrity, and that is precisely the point. After every fight, no matter how big the spotlight had been days earlier, his first shift back at the station always somehow includes bathroom duty, a running joke among his co-workers that also happens to be their way of keeping one of the greatest heavyweights in history exactly as grounded as everyone else on the team. With a net worth sitting around $4 million, Stipe could easily walk away from emergency work forever, but he has explained that he wants something to fall back on once fighting is finished, a mindset shaped by a working-class Croatian-American upbringing where nothing was ever handed to him. This is a man who once talked a reluctant woman into going to the hospital for chest pain, only for her to go into cardiac arrest in the ambulance, where Stipe performed CPR and used a defibrillator to help save her life. That is not the resume of a pampered athlete chasing fame. That is the resume of someone who happens to be a UFC champion on the side. He still goes home after fights to his rural Ohio property, plays with his dogs, spends time with his wife and kids, and once lent his actual heavyweight championship belt to his fire chief son for a school project, letting a 9-year-old walk into class holding one of the most coveted titles in combat sports like it was nothing more than a show and tell prop. Then there is Khabib Nurmagomedov, a man whose relationship with money might be the most philosophically fascinating of them all. Khabib retired undefeated, a perfect 29-0 record that alone would justify almost any level of extravagance, and with a net worth estimated near $40 million, he has more than enough to buy anything on the planet. Yet he chooses not to, and he has explained this choice in strikingly blunt terms, describing expensive possessions as things that simply do not give him good energy. Growing up in Dagestan, Khabib lived what he has described as an army-style existence, sharing a rented house with his father and roughly 15 other fighters, everyone cooking and cleaning for themselves with zero luxury and zero shortcuts. That environment shaped the rest of his life. When offered $40 million to come out of retirement for a single fight, he turned it down instantly, because for Khabib, legacy has always outweighed money. He does not drink, does not smoke, and does not party. His wife has remained almost entirely out of the public eye by choice, and Khabib fiercely protects that privacy even as he stands as one of the most recognized athletes in Russia with tens of millions of followers online. When his father passed away in 2020, Khabib retired on the spot, honoring a promise he had made to his mother that he would never fight without his father by his side, a promise that no contract, no paycheck, and no amount of pressure could ever shake. Since retiring, he opened a martial arts school named after his father, purchased a fighting promotion to create opportunities for the next generation, and continues living a structured, disciplined life built entirely around values rather than wealth. Max Holloway's story carries a very different weight, one rooted in survival rather than philosophy. Long before he became one of the greatest featherweights to ever compete, Max grew up in a household destabilized by addiction, watching both of his parents struggle with drugs while his father's abuse eventually drove him out of the family entirely. His mother's battle with methamphetamine meant Max and his siblings often found themselves in the care of their grandparents for days at a time, and it took his older brother threatening to keep her away from future grandchildren before she finally got clean. Watching all of that unfold as a child gave Max an early, painful understanding of exactly what he did not want his life to become, and he made a conscious decision that punching people for a living would be his way out, and more importantly, his way to build something stable. He started training at 15, won his first amateur fight within days, turned professional at 19, and eventually captured UFC gold, becoming one of the most beloved and skilled fighters in the promotion's history. Despite a net worth around $5 million, Max has never chased the celebrity lifestyle. He is not flashy online, does not brag about money, and instead pours his energy into family life and community work back home in Hawaii, work that earned him recognition for his charitable contributions. His philosophy is simple and devastatingly effective, the belief that it does not matter how you start the race, only how you finish it, a mantra that defines both his fighting career and the quiet, steady life he has built away from the cameras. Jim Miller might be the most unusual case of all, a fighter who holds UFC records for total fights and total wins in the lightweight division, yet lives a lifestyle that looks almost nothing like professional athletics. With a net worth around $2 million, Jim resides on an 8-acre property in rural New Jersey that functions less like a celebrity estate and more like a full working farm. He and his family raise chickens, ducks, goats, and pigs, grow their own food, hunt for meat, and Jim has even talked about building a smokehouse to prepare fresh trout himself. This is not some passing hobby picked up for social media attention. It is a direct continuation of how Jim was raised, in a household where his father farmed and built furniture by hand, and Jim has made it his mission to instill that same self-sufficiency in his own 4 children, taking them on freezing overnight camping trips specifically designed to make them a little uncomfortable, a little hungry, and completely disconnected from screens. He does not watch television unless he happens to be on an airplane, and his daily routine revolves around either intense training camp or farm chores and carpentry projects around the property he affectionately calls Calamity Farm, so named because something is always going wrong there. Jim has fought at 3 separate milestone UFC events, a distinction no other fighter shares, and he continues competing at an elite level while simultaneously building a second career around homesteading content and a self-published cookbook, preparing methodically for the day his fighting career finally ends. Edmund Shahbazian represents something different again, a young fighter whose financial maturity feels almost unusual for someone barely in his late 20s. After bursting onto the UFC scene as a teenage prospect trained by the same coach who developed Ronda Rousey, Edmund rocketed up the middleweight rankings before hitting a brutal 3-fight losing streak that could have shattered a less disciplined athlete. Instead of unraveling, he relocated to Las Vegas, changed camps, and rebuilt his approach to both fighting and life with the same calculated patience. He does not flaunt purchases online, does not chase hype, and instead keeps his life centered on training, his relationship, and his Armenian heritage, which he has proudly represented on some of the sport's biggest stages. His comeback, 3 straight wins and counting, mirrors the quiet, methodical rebuilding he applied to his finances and his mindset, treating both fighting and money with the same long-term discipline rather than chasing instant gratification. And then there is Demetrius Johnson, widely regarded as one of the most technically gifted mixed martial artists to ever compete, a man who defended his flyweight title a record 11 consecutive times. For the first 15 fights of his career, including several inside the UFC itself, Demetrius still clocked in every morning at a recycling factory, operating a forklift from early morning until mid-afternoon before heading to train, terrified that fighting alone would never be enough to support his family. Even after finally going full-time and eventually becoming the sport's pound-for-pound best fighter, Demetrius never bought into extravagance, choosing instead to save for his children's future and build a life defined by routine rather than spectacle. Now retired with a Hall of Fame legacy behind him, he spends his time as a hands-on father and a dedicated streamer, quietly building a second career for the years ahead, proving once again that some of the toughest people in the sport are also the most unassuming. Taken together, these stories paint a picture that runs completely against everything fight fans are conditioned to expect from championship-level athletes. These men have earned staggering fortunes through pain, sacrifice, and years of punishing preparation, yet almost all of them chose modest homes, ordinary cars, and lives built around family and purpose instead of luxury. So now it is worth asking which of these stories hit you the hardest, and which of these fighters surprised you the most with how differently they chose to live. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments, and if this kind of story pulled you in, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the lives of the fighters who built empires and still chose to stay humble.